Hi everyone, welcome to M4G Advocacy Media. You're watching the Journey Series video podcast. I'm Mark, a brown man with somewhat of a black and white beard. I'm bald and I have glasses and a purple shirt.
And I'm Crystal. Today I'm wearing a teal shirt with flowers, curly shoulder length hair. I have brown glasses, or are they blue? They're blue. I think they're blue
No,
today.
they're brown. I definitely
Okay.
wouldn't call that teal though. That's more of a powder blue.
Okay.
Yeah, and today we have the pleasure of speaking to Chad Bouton or Bouton, depending on where you're from. And he's a podcaster and disability advocate. Hi, Chad.
Hello, how are you guys?
We're
We're
doing
doing
well.
good. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, of course. And I'll share what I look like as well, since you both did. I'm a super pale white man. And I'm wearing what I think is a black polo shirt, but it could be a dark blue.
It
Never.
is.
Okay, it's dark blue.
Mhm.
Okay. Never know with those two colors, the whole blue and black colorblind and just being blind in general. I have a dark gray, almost black cap on my head, and I've got black square rimmed glasses on my face. And
And
yeah.
there's a black lab in the background.
Oh
One,
yes, of course.
yeah.
There should be two of them. There's mine, who's retired, Andros, Andros, and then there's my sister's, who is still working, Ava, AVA. And yep, always got them with me no matter where I go. Even when I tell them to stay, they break into my office because they know how to open the doors.
Yeah.
So, do you want to tell us a bit about your journey so far?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I kind of gave it away, I'm blind. I've been losing my vision since I was 11 years old to retinitis pigmentosa. Both my sister and I have RP. Our parents are recessive carriers, so it just so happened that my mom and dad met, out of the million upon million of people out there in the world. They somehow found each other, had no idea. They carried the, genes for retinitis pigmentosa, and they ended up having two kids that ended up having RP. And yeah, been losing our vision ever since then. I was 11 and my sister was 10 years old when we were officially diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa. So I just turned 31, so it's been about 20 years of losing my vision. But,
How did you get into the advocacy and podcasting space? What led you to that and those experiences?
So I went to college to be a teacher, and I had all intentions of teaching history to middle school or high school. So I didn't even get a degree in like communications or digital accessibility because I didn't think that was going to be what I did. And for a while, I didn't do anything in terms of advocacy. After graduating from college, I was unfortunately not able to get a job in education. So I went into philanthropy, and I worked from 2018 until 2021 as a philanthropist for an organization here in Southeast Florida called, well, it used to be Southeastern Guide Dogs, but they rebranded to Dogs Incorporated. But it's the organization that both my sister and I got our guide dogs from. So I worked for them as a philanthropist, and I probably would still be there if not for the pandemic. Obviously, many people like myself, we found ourselves out of a job when the pandemic happened, especially in the public sector. There was no way for people doing public events like I was responsible for, as my philanthropic position was. you know, you can't really do public events when you're banned from going outside into the public. So
Right.
got let go, which no, you know, hard feelings. They did what they had to do to keep the organization going. And, you know, I'd rather they save money for the dogs than me because I can go somewhere else and find my own, you know, kind of path in life. And that's what I did. I ended up launching my podcast after, funny enough, I didn't even really think of podcasting until I was contacted by the United Kingdom's Royal National Institute for Blind People. And the RNIB is kind of like a division of blind service or lighthouse for the blind. They kind of help people with daily living skills, you know, helping them with O&M training, just kind of giving them the skills they need to live independent and confidently while losing their vision or having lost their vision. And one of their content creators for the radio show found an article that I published for a game publication out of the United Kingdom on accessibility in video games. And they kind of sloughed me down. They found me and they asked me to come on to their podcast that they do. And I recorded some content with them, did a couple appearances, and they were just very nice. Everybody there kept encouraging me to use my voice, and they kept telling me that my lived experience had purpose and could be used for, you know, encouragement or maybe hopefully change the world in a better way. And I finally one day decided that I should take the plunge and get my voice out there and created my podcast. So the Unsyted Radio was launched in 2022. So it's been going for about 2 years now. And yeah, it's just one of those things where I never intended to do it, but it was kind of one of those things where it felt like the world was telling me, you need to do this. So I listened and I decided that I was going to become an advocate.
That's amazing. Yeah, there can be a lot of awesome blessings that come out of adversity and challenges. And you know, for lack of a better word, being ostracized, you know, and being kept out of spaces, you know, given a voice, finding your voice finally, you know, that's amazing.
Mhm.
What would you say is the underlining, it was probably a collective bit of things that happened that got you to that. But what would you say was the biggest driver to get there?
I think it was, you know, when the pandemic happened and I lost my job, you know, there was a lot of kind of depression. And it wasn't more so like I felt bad because of my eyesight. It was more like, man, I finally kind of escaped the limitations of my disability. I had moved away from my hometown. I had been living on my own for about like 4 years. I'd bought my own house with the money I saved from working. And it was kind of like, wow, look at me. I'm doing what people told me I could never do. I mean, I had friends or supposed friends and family members literally tell my parents that I was never going to move out of their house, that I was never going to amount to anything. Kind of be that cliche stereotype of, oh, blind people, they just sit on the couch, collect a check, and they don't ever do anything. And I broke out of that. And I was super happy that I was living independently and confidently. And I just remember as kind of stalled for about a year and a half when I lost my job in 2021. You know, I was like, what do I do next? I didn't really have an idea of what I wanted to do. And I was getting a little scared because obviously I didn't have enough money to pay all my bills. At the time, Social Security thought it'd be a great idea to completely cut all of my support um,
Well,
because they just love to do that at the most random times, even though they should have never done it. Once hindsight is 2020 or 2200, as I joke. They should have never done it, but they did it anyways. And I was just like, you know what? I don't know what's going to happen, but I do know one thing and that is I don't want to move back in with my parents. I don't want to leave the life that I've built for myself here in South Florida. I'll do whatever I have to do to make what I have right now, my constant. And that way I don't have to move backwards. I can keep moving forward. And I just scraped and clawed. I did everything I could to stay here where I had built my life. I became a janitor and did some of the nastiest, hardest work that people have to do to keep things clean. And eventually, I just kind of stumbled my way into content creation because I eventually just started reaching out to organizations, especially gaming publications, because I was feeling there has to be at least one place that will let me share my story as a disabled gamer and will let me share the positive impact gaming has had on me mentally and emotionally, especially of coping with the loss of my vision as RP is a progressive condition. So I continue to lose my vision, maybe not every day, but every so couple of years. And yeah, I would say to answer your question in a long roundabout way is the motivation was to not lose my independence and confidence. And that's when RNIB reached out to me and I latched onto that. And they were kind enough to just keep encouraging me and telling me that you could be an advocate, you could share your story, and you could impact the world in a bigger way than you ever could realize.
That's amazing. And it says a lot about you in that, you mentioned doing whatever you had to do to stay above water and keep your independence and stuff like that. But a lot of people have done it where they had to step on other people to achieve that. But you're doing it trying to help other people. And both the gaming community, you're podcasting and helping people that way. Um, I, we've talked about previously, it's very similar to what we're doing, but of course you have a lot of other different perspectives than we have, because of the disability differences, and just the area we live in and stuff like that. But back to like just being able to do it and not step on toes while you're trying to do that is very admirable. So thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. That means a lot. I try my best to live an honest lifestyle. I was raised very humbly by my parents. I have both a very strong paternal figure, but an even stronger maternal figure. My mother has always been kind of that voice telling me, hey, don't feel bad about yourself because you're disabled. She even, after I graduated from college, there was a little bit of a period where I didn't know what I wanted to do. And she's like, listen, I love you, Chad, but we want you to live independent and confidently. So we don't want to kind of enable you. So if you can't find a job with your current degree, then you need to go back to college and get another degree, or we'll help you find a job that can help, finance you in the meantime. But she was really upfront with me. It's like, hey, don't let your disability make you feel like you can't do whatever you want, because obviously so many other people like ourselves, our fellow disabled siblings, were always told what we cannot do instead of what we can do. And my mom always kind of wanted to nip that in the bud and say, no, no, you can do anything you want, even if people are going to say you shouldn't be doing that. And I really thank her for that because it really made me the strong person that I am. But, in terms of not stepping on anybody's toes, I I'm a people pleaser. I don't like drama. I feel bad if I hurt anyone's feelings. Uh, I'm just that type of person. So like I really do try my best to never upset anyone that I collaborate with or who is kind of in the same sector that I'm in. I realize that I don't know everything and there will be people that know more than I do. So I'm happy to share what knowledge I have and supplement it where I can. And if I don't, then I'm going to reach out to the people who do. And hopefully, when it comes time,
Yeah.
they'll pay back the favor. But I'm always a big person to pay it forward and just treat people with kindness. That's just,
Right.
that's how I feel people should live. And maybe if we did that a little bit more, it'd be a kinder world.
Absolutely.
And it's a very familiar story. We've heard it a lot on this podcast, and those of us with disabilities sort of have to find our own niche, or if there's a company gracious enough. There aren't many of them, but there are some that will try and make a way for us. But generally, we have to basically make up our own job or our own job description, because nothing out there exists that we can fit into.
Right.
Yeah, that's very well said. I mean, I I remember when I would apply for jobs in high school, and my friends would be working at those jobs, and I'd go through the interview process, and then I'd be told, "Well, you don't have X, Y, Z, and because of that, you're not the right fit." And then you get on the phone with your friend, and they're like, "Oh, how'd the interview go?" And it's like, well, they told me I didn't have enough customer service experience." They're like, "Well, that's weird. I didn't have any customer service experience myself, but I was able to get the job. I wonder why you didn't get it." And then obviously you just immediately know it's like, it's because I'm disabled. That's the reason why. They found their kind of get out of jail card in the reason to tell me like, hey, we don't want you because you're disabled. And that's where, you put it perfectly. A lot of us, we continue to get told no when we should be getting told yes. And that leads us to having to create our own path in life and our own careers. And I think it's sad that we have to do that, but I do think it speaks to the strength of our character that, like, hey, okay, if you're just going to keep saying no to me, I'm going to create my own career, my own business. And, you never know. One day that business can be something greater than anyone could have imagined. And then those people that said no, they're kind of kicking themselves in the butt saying, wow, I missed out on this great person. And then I had just only kind of stepped back and put my own ego out of the way to give them that opportunity. They could have done something great for me, but it just speaks to us, we're problem solvers. And if the world's going to keep giving us the wrong answers, we'll make up our own questions.
Exactly. And, it's like you were saying, having to be told no or given limits or tokenism, dealing with that, it's kind of like, okay, I have a lot of knowledge that you didn't want to hear about, or you didn't give me space to be able to do that. So I'm going to go over here and do my own thing, and I'm going to build a support system and only allow people in that space with me to work with. That is going to make it successful, and
Yeah.
that's can be intimidating to people
Mhm.
to realize that, oh God, why did I do that? But at the same time, you have to realize that generationally, society was not given the steps to know how to treat disability, or people who were saw differently, or whatever the situation. So just systematically, it's been a difficult journey for all of us, and we have to help people come to the realization that that was not correct of what you were told. And we have to prove that as well. Say, these are the things that we are capable of. And if given the right voice and the right atmosphere, then we can do all those things.
Absolutely.
For
100%
sure.
well said.
Where, it's hard to for everyone to be supportive, not giving anyone a pass or justifying their behavior or anything, but everyone's going through their own struggles in their own way in which they're being oppressed. And if that is the focus of their lives, it's very hard to look aside to try and help other people.
Right. And
Mhm.
it's very difficult to come in contact with people who hear me talk about that conversation, and then say, well, I acted like I acted because I was never told by society that I don't have to be that way. Not all of it has to do with that. It also has to do with character. And if you're going to take what you hear and do better, or are you going to keep being a jerk and
Mhm.
not wanting change to happen?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
don't try to justify it by making excuses of I get that. I know you weren't given the tools to be able to do this, but now you know different. So what are you gonna do with it?
Yeah, the excuse of generational trauma only goes so far. I mean, that's okay, that's the backstory, but you're here now and you can make some positive changes. Um, everyone has the power to do that. Not always the right circumstances around them to enable them to
Mhm.
make those changes right away, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I could have been selfish whenever I got, finally my leg up in the world and wanted to hoard all of the confidence and independence for myself because I felt maybe almost entitled because like I haven't had it at all throughout my life. So now that
Right.
I do, I don't want to share it with anyone else because I don't want to lose an ounce of what I'm getting now. But I think it takes a bigger person to step back and say, okay, well, didn't you hate when they hoarded all of the independence and confidence that you're having and experiencing for yourself now? Didn't you hate that when it happened to you? And I think it takes a really honest and humble person to say, yeah, I did hate that. And then want the goal to be that they want the next generation to not have to feel that way or have to experience any of the shortcomings that society experiences systematically because of disability. And the way that I keep myself grounded in reality for what I'm doing is I don't care if I ever make any money off of any of the advocacy work that I do. The way that I will label myself a success and my story a success story is by leaving a legacy behind that allows the next generation of blind and disabled individuals to live a better, happier life. So if I can
That's
at
how we
least
feel,
improve
yeah,
life for one person, then I can go to my grave and meet my maker knowing that I was successful.
exactly.
Yeah, like Crystal was saying, it speaks to your character and the character of other people who are doing that same thing. It's it's easy for I mean, I can perceive that it's not necessarily easy, well, maybe easier, more comfortable for people who have been through a certain maybe trauma or something that is hurtful that to them when they get some success to sort of have this knee-jerk reaction of okay, no one ever gave anything to me, I'm not going to give anything to anyone else, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, to be able to be in that space and realize, okay, you are successful in your own right, but that you should not be diminishing my experiences, and ignoring what I had to do to get to where I am. You know, you're like, I'm going to use the example. So we've both been to college, but I would definitely say 100% that I appreciate and love all the experiences I had in that time and the education I was, got from that. But I would not go backwards and use the knowledge I have. And in that kind of space, you become kind of egotistical and you feel like, okay, the lived experiences are not it. I have the paper, I have the degree, I have the titles. So everyone else, everything else doesn't matter. My opinion is top notch. And I would never want to go back to that space or use that ever again. I love working with people and helping people come to a place of this knowledge, and understanding about the world, and disability and just minorities in general, be able to come to appreciate the human experience instead of that direction.
Yeah. I think it speaks a lot to the world we live in, though, because just if you look around just all the other, societies out there, like right now in the United Kingdom, where they're trying to take away PIP, and they're looking at outlawing DEI work, diversity, equity, and inclusion work. They're literally trying to erase disabled people from society. And it's sad to see that in 2024 that we're still seeing erasure of disabled people, even though that we're the single largest minority in the world. And it just really speaks to the current climate where I think disabled people feel like the only way I'm going to get anywhere in life is to be selfish, because no one else is going to help me but myself, because you've got governments and you've got political parties that should be helping you or were helping you that no longer want to help you, or basically say, well, you don't exist, even though you have the paper saying, no, I am disabled. I think it really just speaks to kind of the messed up world that we live in, unfortunately, when it comes to acknowledging disability.
It's the system is very upside down. They give the most help to the people who need it least and give the hardest time to the people who already have a hard time. Like, if you grew up with a certain amount of privilege with rich parents and certain doors open for you, you get into the best schools, get into the best circles, best parties, best networking. You may even become the president of the US. Yes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's also sad that sure, governments and stuff like that will acknowledge the fact that disability exists and even diagnose kids and give them support as long as they're in school, but then ignore disability support afterwards.
Yeah.
That says a lot about a very messed up.
Yeah, I've always found that very weird. It's like, if you work for a company, or you're in school, we'll help you. But if you're just kind of on your own then sorry, figure it out yourself. It's like, whoa, shouldn't you just be helping us in general? It's like, no, you have to check all these boxes. I'm like, well, that doesn't seem really fair. It just seems like you should just help us because we should be helped.
Right, right.
Not only that, it's all when you become an adult, especially all these systems of support. You have to prove you're disabled and prove you're disabled enough to take advantage of whatever support
Yeah.
there.
Every 5 years, I gotta retell them I'm still permanently disabled. Nothing's gonna change
Yeah,
about that.
I know. I've had a couple years ago, I would have the same conversation of like, get it together, people. We're permanently disabled. That's not going to change. We have a social security number. Look at it. If my
I feel bad for the
disability is
doctors though,
attached to
because
that, that's all you need right there.
yeah, I really feel bad for those doctors that we have to go to though, because they get it. They're just like, why are they sending you to me? And they're like, I don't like, if you don't know, I definitely don't know. But when the
Yeah.
doctor's like, do you want me to write permanently disabled on your file? I'm like, I don't think they read those files.
Yeah. No, I don't think so either. It's like my disability is not going anywhere. I mean, it might change, yes, but it's always going to be a permanent.
Mhm.
But I feel it's a case of, this system itself, they're operating from um their whole system of the way they give out money, they're operating on a limited fear-based sort of system. We only have so much money to give away, and they're prioritizing the wrong things. And so if they gave it everyone across the board the level of support and care that they actually needed throughout their life, we wouldn't need to pay so much for for healthcare and for all this other stuff that we do, which are just sort of band-aid solutions and are problems which happen because they didn't address the actual root cause of the problem.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm. I mean, visually impaired people are some of the most unemployed disabled people in the world. We have one of the highest rates of unemployment, and we still face pay disparity. So we still, depending on the company you work for, we get paid less than our non-disabled peers. So there's still a lot of discrimination and oversight that happens within the community of the visually impaired.
Yes.
And it's sad. It really is. And you then look to supplemental organizations to help, give you some income or secondary income. But then the reality is that they put a cap on how much money you can save, how much you can have at one time. And, unfortunately, they keep you in this perpetual state of poverty. So I think that also makes it to where we feel entitled when we finally get that big break, when things start going our way and we start making a lot of money, or we start kind of creating our own sort of fame, because we almost feel like, yeah, I'm finally owed this, all those years where I was forced to live in poverty, where I was forced and made to feel inferior, when I was overlooked. um, I just think we are put into this negative sense of identity. And I still feel that when it comes to disability in general, even though we are at a better place where there's more people coming out and declaring themselves as disabled or chronically ill, there's still a lot of people who don't, because unfortunately there's still that systematic, um, just stereotype or, sense of discrimination where it's like, yeah, if you're disabled, you're a lesser person. And I feel there's a lot of people that they want to hide that, because the reality is as though we are a more accepting society nowadays, there are still people that the second you tell them, hey, actually, I've been blind for X amount of years and I'm just now letting you know, they're like, oh, well, now I don't really know how to think about you. But it's like, but why? I mean, we've been friends for 20 years. It's like, yeah, but I never knew you were disabled. So there's still a lot of, I, I hate to use the word, but there's still a lot of weirdness when it comes
Yeah.
to
And
disability. It's and coming out and declaring yourself and being positive about a disability identity.
Right.
and then they try and throw it back in you, whether it's a friend or an employer,
Yeah.
who you finally reveal the extent of your disability to, then they might say something like, well, I don't want to be friends with you, or we don't want to employ you anymore because you lied, right? But then
Mm-hmm.
they refuse to take a step back and think about why you lied, because you knew this is how they'd react.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
100%.
we had a conversation a few weeks ago with someone where I was explaining why people mask. And it's that reason right there. It's because we have situations of, I can't think of the word. Opportunities, sorry. We have opportunities stripped from us and judgmental things going on and things like that. And I was explaining to this person that I have a daughter, but because I wasn't given the same pay and the same this and the same that opportunities, then I was then not given the same opportunities when it came to a separation that happened later, financially, you know, uh, there's a lot more to it, but I'm not going to get into that. But anyway, it's to the conversation you're having, it's just, it's to go along with that,
Yeah, so my message to people, because I'm at the point now where I say I'm happy being disabled. I don't mind if I go completely blind and lose the last of my usable vision, because I'll be fine. And I get people all the time saying, like, how can you say that? Like, how could you be happy being born disabled and then losing your vision and continuing to lose your vision? And I just tell people, like, listen, that's just where I've been able to get to. That's just me. It's never going to be everybody. And I don't say that to push my message onto everybody needs to be happy they're disabled, because no, at the end of the day, being disabled does suck. It's not fun. It's definitely not something I would recommend and say, hey, if you have the chance to be disabled, take it. No, don't take it. I just feel like for me, I'm at a point now where I've done enough grieving. I've done enough, counseling, and managing loss versus, the gain that I have now. And I take all that I can out of the small things that I get and try to not take too much out of the negative things that I get. And I don't know. I take it day by day, and I just feel like, yes, the world still isn't made for me, and it probably never will be. It'll probably only start getting better once I've left this world. But, whatever time I have, I think it's better to use it positively and constructively for a good purpose, rather than to just wallow in self-pity and be mad and angry like I used to be. Because I was a very angry person. I hated my disability for a long time. I didn't want to live, really, I was a very angry and selfish person. And it was because of my disability, because I felt that it was better to want to be normal. And I hate that word because it became so obsessive for me. I always said, well, normal people get to do this, this, and that. And because I can't do that, then that means I'm not normal. And so my disability became a very negative and ugly thing for me. And now where I'm at in my life where I can actually use what I thought was ugly in a negative thing in a constructive and positive way, it just it goes to show me like, wow, look, the thing you saw was the worst thing to ever happen to you. The thing that you literally didn't want to live life because you thought it would be better off than for you to just, sleep forever, take that eternal sleep. Look what it's been able to do for you. And again, that's not me trying because I don't ever want to like push the narrative, oh, disability is ability or disadvantages can become your advantage. It's like, no, that's not for everybody. Don't drink the Kool-Aid if you don't want to. But I just feel there's a lot more good I can be doing using the trauma that I've gone through because of my disability to help make sure that, again, the next generation doesn't have to feel that way and can have an easier time accepting themselves and loving themselves, even though they are disabled and chronically ill, because there's nothing wrong with being disabled and or chronically ill.
No, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And no, I don't think there's anything wrong with drinking the Kool-Aid necessarily. I mean, if you're not, you're right. If somebody's not disabled, why we're not trying to tell people that's something to be happy with or to rejoice over. But if you do find yourself disabled, there's no point of wasting a whole bunch of time and energy mourning that. I mean, it's necessary to a certain extent.
Absolutely.
There are lots of advantages that you do have and you can gain if you're willing to take the time to look for them. Like we just watched, I love Star Trek, and we just watched an episode of Strange New Worlds, their new series. And there's a alien on that show called Hammer. He's an engineer and he's blind. He's blind, right? So, but all his other senses are heightened. And there's one scene where they're stuck in the airlock, and he's stuck with the sighted, able-bodied, well, I'm not like the term able-bodied, but non-disabled person. And he has to walk her through what to do because there's some debris in his pin and he can't actually do the work, so he has to walk her through it as a blind person. And she's there totally clueless, like, how do I know to do this? He has extra perceptions about touch and hearing that he's able to pick up on that she is blind to, because blind is, I don't mean to use it as a derogatory term, but she is not aware of,
right?
Because she hasn't had to develop that skill.
Right.
Right.
And that's lovely.
That's where we can find it an advantage to understand what skills we have that other people aren't open to, simply because they don't have those things missing in their toolkit or whatever.
Yeah.
He can explain this better, but it was so interesting watching him explain it to her and her pulling out.
It was
like a
cooling rod or
cooling rod in the. It was interesting, and telling her like, listen and you're gonna have to use your other senses to feel and listen to what's going on around you, because there was a lot of blast and things going on at the same time. It was so interesting.
Yeah.
And I think as a disability community, and everybody included, that's what we have to do. Like, my abilities are totally different than yours is his, and anybody else. We have to collectively come together and help people understand how we operate,
Yeah.
we can't silo ourselves. And
Absolutely. We can't fight
and-
amongst ourselves, or gatekeep,
that's
like,
not
well,
gonna
you're not completely blind, so you can't speak for us, or, you just started losing your vision. So, you can still kind of drive even though you're losing your vision. So it's like, you don't belong. It's like, stop all of that, because that doesn't do anybody any good. That just makes people who are starting to lose their vision or have just lost all their vision feel ostracized and feel like they don't belong in the community. And
Right.
that's not good. That's not a good thing at all, to be honest.
And so we really appreciate people like you that are able to help us understand your perception of how you go through life, because our disability is totally different. And just like anybody else, we need to be open and willing to listen to what you deal with so that we can understand. And just like, sorry, go ahead. I get kind of upset when because people have obviously not done that, and not been understanding of people's disabilities and listening to them. So it's kind of like, kind of more so getting there where people are starting to do that. And then, it's very hopeful for me that it's going to get a lot better, but it's never going to happen. Like I said, if the disability community silos themselves and makes it
Absolutely.
where, we can't do it for each other. So
I
Yeah.
think
No,
in a lot of
100%.
ways, we're getting there slowly, but it's kind of like any personal, any life coach is gonna tell you, if you're gonna do anything great, the greater the thing you're doing, the more pushback you're gonna get. So you're hearing all this stuff, like this sort of anti-woke kind of stuff, where people are they're really going overly conservative, and they want to shut everything down, and they're really resistant to change. But that's because we're really hitting the nail on the head, and really kind of close to their comfort zone,
right.
right?
And not only that, but when you have a society that was never told how to treat disability, and some of their ways of doing things created a comfort for them, they became comfortable in having the things they had and keeping people down, and they don't want to give up those comforts. So that can bring out like a internalized fear, of losing your comforts. And other people have the comforts too, in the place of that. Not in the place of that, but equally just as much. Yeah. So, it's gonna take time to get there, and it slowly is, but it's, we just have to be patient.
There
Yeah,
are,
and that can be hard. It definitely can be
Yes.
hard, especially for those of us who are disabled and chronically ill, because we sometimes have to wait the longest. I think
Yeah.
it's important to know that accessibility, diversity, equity, inclusion, it is being worked on as we speak. And sometimes, and obviously, I use the analogy of game development because, I live in the accessibility world for gaming. There are games that have been being built for the last 7+ years that are accessible. And once they release, people are going to be so excited about how inclusive they are. And that's kind of the way I look at the world. It's like, really, the world does suck for disabled people, but there are people and organizations at work right now and who have been at work for multiple years, maybe even decades, that it's going to happen soon where that next big step forward happens for universal inclusion because, it will happen one day, but it's going to have to take time and we will have to wait. And trust me, waiting sucks. It really does. But people are working to make it better. That is a definite fact.
yeah, for sure. There are a lot of people that are doing that. But I think, like you said, at some point, we're gonna have to level up, right?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's gonna be rough. And it's not gonna be easy because the way we're currently going, where there are people making lots of positive changes for sure, but they're doing it through the systems and laws that we already have. That in effect is like trying to build a house with a broken hammer, right? You can you can only get so far
Yeah,
until you have to replace the hammer,
but
right?
I
And when we get to that point, sorry,
go ahead.
when you get to that point, nobody's gonna want to do it.
They're
It's
all out
gonna
of
be-
hammers.
It's gonna be a bit.
Like, as you were saying before, it's awesome in the gaming community. Watching all these developers be able to go in and show that things can be accessible. You can't make accommodations and plant it inside your systems for everything else, including work, and everything online can be. And there's a lot of excuses and justifications and stuff like that, but it is very, very possible.
Yeah, it is. And all those excuses and that are thrown up are because people don't want to let go of their comforts. I mean, there are lots of very idealistic ideas that would probably solve all of our problems at the root cause, but people don't want to go there, or that's some like hippie nonsense that they just dismiss it. Like, do you know how many problems would be solved if we just eliminated money as a thing? Like, I go back to Star Trek because it's like my favorite thing. There's no money. I mean, in some places of the universe there still is, but for the most part, they have replicators. You want something? Well, just replicate it. Give everyone the same technology, same capability, and guess what? Nobody has any problems anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, the way I look at it, comparing, what's going on in the gaming world with the outside, real world is, the excuses are becoming less and less acceptable. It's like, no, 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 you can't keep telling me that you can't do it because you're too small of a company. It's like, well, I have like 10 examples of single individual developers that made an accessible game. So there is an actual diagram, a blueprint plan for you to make your game accessible. And I look at the outside world, like during the pandemic, remote work became a true thing. And for the first time, for a lot of disabled people, they were now able to get jobs. They were now able to start working and making money for themselves, really start creating a lifestyle for themselves that they hadn't been able to have access to prior to remote work becoming more and more abundant. And now we see that, oh, okay, we're going to take the accessibility of remote work away because now you have to come back in person. It's like, well, no, don't do that. And it's like, well, why are you doing that? Well, we can just have people come back into actual, in-person positions now. It's like, yeah, but now you're going to remove all the accessibility. It's like, you can't tell me you can't make positions accessible or remote when you prove that you could do it. So it's like, there are all these cases of, well, we've proven that we can incorporate and accommodate disabled people in every facet of, reality now. It's just now people are just trying to play the whole same excuse card, Uno reverse card. It's like, no. We're a little bit smarter, a little bit wiser now to those Uno reverse cards, and it's not going to fly anymore. And that's where the online presence has been so great for us because our voices out there, podcasts like both of ours are important. It's getting the word out there, giving the recognition to the lived experiences that matter, and showing to the world of what we're capable of and why it makes no sense for us to try and reverse everything that we have put in place. It
Right.
does more harm than it does good.
Yeah.
For sure. And we're supposed to be this advanced society. And we can look at that in the everything horrible that went on during COVID, and we can say that that part of it was a way for us to advance because now we see all these things that could be in place, definitely, but we're making excuses for why we don't want to advance in that space.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And that's why the more we talk about it, the more we call it out, the more people are held accountable. And that, obviously that's a hard thing to do because not everybody is comfortable with holding people accountable for,
Right.
ableism, because it is a nerve-wracking thing to do to pursue that and actually be like, no, I'm going to have my voice heard because I've been discriminated against. And it is hard to do that, but if you can't do it yourself, then I know for a fact there are allies there that will stand behind you and help you. So I just think, like it's been said, it's getting there slowly but surely. We're becoming more confident and more sure of ourselves, but we still have a long way to go. And
Yeah.
obviously that's why we're here. That's why we're all doing what we're doing, is we just want to continue to make sure we don't lose any of the progress that we've made. And we just want to continue to spin the wheel forward because we see where the world can go. And we just gotta keep holding people accountable and keep just proving that we're here. We're not going to be quiet, and we are going to be heard, and we're going to be represented.
And it's about us working together. When we come to a point where we realize that there are much more of us people with disabilities, people of different minorities, just generally oppressed people who are being kept down. Once we come together and realize there's way more of us than there is of the people in power, then things are going to start to change.
Yeah. And also as a society and just in general, we were taught to divide everything and divide different people and minorities and stuff like that. So even like we talked about in the disability world, a lot of disability, they like to divide themselves and say, so like we said, silo themselves and say, well, this is my experience and you don't fit in this box. So, we're not going to listen. And so that's it, because we're all conditioned to do that, and that's the wrong way to go about it, and that's not even my opinion of but I mean, if you just look at the data and look at the experiences, as a whole, common sense tells you, no, that was totally wrong.
Yeah. I mean, and that's why my podcast, it started off as a visually impaired / blind podcast where I was originally only going to talk about vision loss because that's my lived experience. I can speak about that.
Right, right.
Obviously, I can only speak about what I experienced because the reality is even if I had a group of 20 people who all had retinitis pigmentosa, all of our lived experiences would be different, even though we have the same
Yeah.
disability.
Mhm.
But I realized very early on in the podcast lifespan that I wanted to have more conversations with other disabled people. So, people who are deaf, people who are paraplegic or quadriplegic, people living with autism, or spinal cord injuries. Just, I wanted to talk to all these different communities because, like you said, I feel for the most part, we're kind of all sectored off into our own little camps and we don't really converse a lot. And when we do, we still kind of get that weird kind of sense of awkwardness of talking to other people with different disabilities other than our own. Or we feel like if we do have multiple disabilities, we can't really speak about, like, for instance, I'm also autistic. Um, but for a long time I felt like, well, because I've been more blind than I have been autistic throughout my life, especially only getting my diagnosis, within the last couple years, I still, internally feel like, should I even be talking about being autistic or, my experience with autism spectrum disorder? Because in reality, I've only had my diagnosis for like 3 years versus those who have had it for their entire life. Whereas with my vision loss, I've had that my entire life. So there's still kind of like that sense of awkwardness. Like, do we belong? Do we have a voice in this community? Should we be speaking? Or should we be speaking only about one of our disabilities while masking the others? There's so much complexity. There really is. And that's why with my podcast is I want to talk to everybody because let's get rid of that awkwardness and all the misunderstanding and let's just talk together as one.
Right. And I do want to say that, so the other day I was having a conversation on LinkedIn with someone, and they were pointing out that if someone is autistic, you can't say that, oh, well, this person's a little bit autistic and this person has full, on the spectrum, they have a they're more autistic and stuff like that. And I would say in the able body community, that's not okay. The only way that would be okay is if in my, well, in my situation, if my ataxia was something I dealt with every day and a lot more visible to you. And in my experience, that was something a lot more, that I dealt with. But I also say I also had autism. So I could say I'm just a little bit autistic. But that's not my full thing. Uh, what do you think about that?
Yeah, it is it is definitely something to think about, and it's something that I still struggle with because like this year I celebrated my first, autism awareness month because I finally, I have my diagnosis now the last 3 years, but I'm only now feeling comfortable about talking about my autism spectrum disorder, my traits and how, you know, kind of I exhibit, when I have. And I just think, obviously there's, I'm still learning myself everything in terms of the terminology and the language. I know, Asperger's, that's no longer acceptable. High functioning, that's no longer acceptable. Because it's all about like, well, we don't want to make people think, oh, well, because you're not more normal act or you don't act more normal, that means your autism is worse or yours is better, like that to me is wrong. It's like, let's not, kind of do that. It's like for like blind, it's like, okay, if you have more usable vision, but you're still visually impaired, then you're good. But if you're totally blind, then your blindness is a bad thing. It's like, no, it's like, because then that just creates negative stigmas for people within the communities, and that's never a good thing. You don't want to make people think, oh, because my level of vision loss or my level of autism is XYZ level, that means I'm a worse person. That's just a gross way of making people with disability feel bad about being disabled. um, and in terms about speaking, I don't, if you have a diagnosis, and sometimes I feel even if you don't have a true diagnosis, because let's be honest, it's hard to get in and actually be diagnosed with a disability or chronic illness nowadays. The waiting list is insane just to get in and have a doctor finally say, yeah, it's like, all right, cool. It's been about 3 years. I could have had a yes 3 years ago, but we had to do all these hoops and hurdles to get here. Um, I feel like communities should do a lot less gatekeeping. And no matter the level of a disability or chronic illness, if you have any sort of lived experience, then you should be able to talk about it. Now, again, if you're not comfortable or confident talking about it, then you shouldn't feel forced to talk about it. But if you want to start talking about it, then I would love if someone doesn't come in and say, well, hey, you have only been living with it for a year, or you're only, just got diagnosed. So, you don't have much of a stake in the accessibility disability community as we do. It's like, no, I think it takes all levels of lived experience. So I think the more the better. And let's just stop bullying each other when it comes to being disabled. Let's not be our own enemies, That's what I think.
And I can also see how um and we've seen this in some online communities where uh let's take the example of vision that you mentioned, where maybe some people with who have had less vision for longer, somehow they've struggled more, and therefore their hardships are more worth the while, or somehow they're better than someone who hasn't had the same challenge, but doesn't mean it hasn't been as hard for the person who has more vision, right?
In my opinion, any level of discrimination or ableism, no matter how small or large, is traumatic. So it could be simple as being led to sit at a table at a restaurant that is away from all the other normal restaurant goers. That, even though you may feel like, well, that's not traumatic, that is traumatic. That is isolation. That is you being made to feel different or feeling like you don't belong with the rest of the, society. So in my opinion, any level, no matter how small, can be traumatic. And that trauma, that you talking about that trauma can be very therapeutic and helpful to someone who is either just starting or has been for a long time, felt like their, trauma isn't good enough to speak about. I feel no matter how small or large, I feel if you've been discriminated against or you've experienced, ableism because of disability or chronic illness, then if you speak up about it, you should be heard and you should be acknowledged. And I do understand that, yeah, some people have had it worse. They've been experiencing it longer or for their entire life. But just because someone has only just now begun experiencing discrimination, ableism, that doesn't mean it has any less value or ramifications than those who have been experiencing it since birth or for 15, 20 years versus 1 or 5 years. I guess that's what I have to say about that.
Right.
Yeah, and there's some groups where like on Facebook where you go in and you get the sense that some subset of the whatever disability we're talking about, they feel more entitled, or because their particular variety of that disability gets more of the funding and more attention and more everything, that somehow they're better.
Yeah, I mean,
And
everybody has their own prerogatives as well. We all have our own egos, but I think it's important to realize that we're not trying to invalidate each other when we bring up our lived experience. It's like, we're not trying to say, oh, mine's much worse than yours. So, sit down and be quiet. It's like, no, we're never trying to, do a one, like a versus between our disability and your disability. I think it's just like maybe don't take it as a competition. And I think that's the problem sometimes with even nonprofit organizations. It's like, why be so competitive against each other when we're all trying to do the same thing? We're all trying to make the world more accessible, and we're all trying to make the world a little bit nicer and a lot more kinder. So if we're all racing towards the same finish line, why do we need to be so competitive and so mean to each other? Let's all just get along and help each other. And that's where I think, sometimes those personal egos come in the way. And I think if we strip that away more and more and realize like, hey, we have no reason to be fighting with each other because we're working for the same thing. I know that's hard. And obviously I'm speaking from my own place where I'm at with my identity. It's like, that's what I think. It's like, dude, why are we fighting? We're working towards the same thing. We should be helping each other, not competing against each other. But I guess that's just me.
well, that's
No.
the right attitude. We definitely, that's the way we operate. It's all about collaboration versus competition. The old way of thinking, the thing that holds us back as a culture and humans, is this idea of competition, and which is good to a certain extent, but we have to move past that to collaboration. And you know, if we keep competing, we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot, and we're actually holding ourselves back from the dreams we have about accessibility.
Mhm.
Yeah, the only competing that should be going on is the fun competing and not comparison competing,
Mhm.
like Mark was saying, and the collaborations are what we need to be looking toward.
I think the only people we should maybe emphasize competition more with and steer away from collaboration is the people who are actually holding us back and restraining us from progressing. But even then, we should strongly advocate for a collaboration unless it's completely impossible.
I don't
Right.
think even there it requires us to be competitive or comparing with them, because My opinion of it is to help them understand why we shouldn't go that way, and
Right.
to then collectively try to decide how we're going to go forward in the world, you know. But I think if we at any point try to compete with anybody, I think it's going to just go right back into what we came from, you know.
Yeah.
I have an addendum. Okay,
Okay.
she's right.
Okay.
Um,
I'm sorry.
and I may be misspoke because she's 100% right. Where we can't use their tactics to try and defeat other people or other ideas, and in doing so become them, because that's not what we
Yeah.
want
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah.
But
And that's very easy to do when you're not, being
right.
conscious about it.
But
Right.
what we can do is indirectly compete with them by collaborating with everyone and
Yeah.
getting them on our side and
Absolutely.
sort of rendering them obsolete, those powers that be.
Yeah. And
Or
it's
turning them into our
okay.
allies.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
It's okay to, because as I said before, we were told as a society that was the way to be comparing each other and be competitive toward each other, you know. Uh Consumers, you know, that's just the name of the game. But that's not to say that's how it needs to be going forward, you know. So there's nothing wrong with saying that and then realizing, oh yeah, we don't need to do that so much anymore, and steering away from that.
There are people in history like Martin Luther King or Gandhi that use the same principles of collaboration and path uh what's the word, I guess pacifism,
Mm-hmm.
to collaborate
Non-violence.
with everyone and defeat the powers that be, or at least bring them to their knees in a impactful way by not simply not engaging them and doing this, not doing what they wanted,
Mhm.
you know.
And it's just amazing to see just how even thinking a different way, Martin Luther King Jr., Gandhi, just thinking differently in itself is seen as a threat to society. It's like, oh, they literally are rocking the boat. They are trying to change the way that society is persisting. They're trying to get rid of racism and classism. They're going against society, so they're the enemy. And that's kind of no different. I mean, obviously it's very different, but in a way there's similarities with those of us who are advocating for accessibility and universal inclusion. Is we think differently than others. They see us as, you shouldn't participate in the areas that you're not supposed to be participating in. Like, for instance, sports. People don't think that disabled people can play sports, but there are amazing Paralympic athletes out there that are super competitive. But people think of us crazy when they say, I want to do competitive blind hockey. They're like, why would you want to do that, disabled Chad? It's like, because I know I can do it. It's like, well, that's completely different than what society wants you to do. But I think that's what makes change so amazing, is it can just start from thinking differently or wanting to basically go outside the expectations of what people have placed upon society. And especially right now with disability, that is a big challenge because we're just continuing to try and push our way into mediums and sectors where they've never really wanted us, but we are becoming more and more vocal. Like, no, we want to be included here. We want to sit at the table. And they're like, well, this goes against the system. It's like, well, the system's broken.
Yeah.
And we're trying to help you fix it.
And it very much people have there's some people who have a vested interest in the reason why they want us to conform and do things that the way they want us to is because all that time energy helps keep the system running, which ends up paying them or going into their pockets, right?
Oh, yeah, 100%.
And
Yeah.
more and more people that don't follow the system means that it's gonna end up breaking down and they're not gonna be able to get rich off the backs of other people.
Yeah, that is very true. And it sucks that it's so twisted that way, where it's like, yeah, the reason that the healthcare system is so broken is because those doctors make so much money off of keeping us sick. So it's like, why would they ever want cures to some of these more complicated sicknesses and chronic illnesses when they would be out of a job? So that is a very interesting point that that you bring up, because it does have some validations. It really does.
It certainly does. Yeah, I've had a lot of conversations around the reasons why some pharmacists and doctors and stuff that are able to stay in business. It's people like us, and of course they have their knowledge, they have their degree, they're there for a reason, right? They're helpful, but they've also taken away from the lived experiences and us telling them, hey, this is going on, but no, they'd rather give us drugs and not to say that there's not drugs out there that are doing wonderful things for people, but there's also been a lot of things, different prescription stuff out there that cause so many more symptoms unnecessarily.
And then you got to get a drug to cure those symptoms that the first drug was causing, and then so on and so
It
forth.
begs a lot of questions.
And if you do the research, and understand how deeply embedded this is, not like there's medical system and it's deeply embedded within the economic system and the political system, and they're all feeding off each other, and some people are getting rich off.
So, oh goodness, we could have like so many conversations. Thank you so much for and we can't wait to come on your podcast and
yes,
maybe not
absolutely.
continue everything, but
we're just gonna start off where we leave off right now.
sure,
Yeah.
why not?
Before we go here, do you want to
Oh yeah,
tell people a bit more about your podcast and maybe
sorry.
remind us of the name and tell us how they can listen to it and all that?
Absolutely, yeah. So the name of the podcast is The Unsyted Radio, and I spell it UNSY as in Yankee, TED, The Unsyted Radio. It's available on Amazon Music, Audible, Overcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. So almost pretty much anywhere you get a podcast that you could listen to it. It's really all about disability. Or sometimes it's about things that maybe you wouldn't think impact disability. So like for instance, music, and how, for me, music has always been therapy. So talking to musicians or even disabled musicians. Of course, gaming is a big thing on my podcast because I've always been a gamer long before I started losing my vision, and I'll be a gamer even if I lose all of my vision one day. So talking about the trend of accessibility, I talk to therapists, I talk to veterinarians that work with guide dogs, talk about guide dogs, um, you know, talk about the government and disability, and basically, people who work within the employment and how employment and unemployment affects disability. So it's pretty much anything, lifestyle, a little bit of politics, recreation, anything that has an impact on disability, whether it be a positive or a negative. I love to talk about, trauma, because I think sometimes we talk maybe too much about the positive and try to ignore the fact that it does suck being disabled. There's a lot of trauma that we deal with. And I think it can help a lot of people by having someone come on a podcast like ours and talk to us about the trauma they've dealt with, how it's affected them, and I think most importantly, how they've moved past it or how they're starting to heal from it. Because I think that's very important, especially for young adolescents or people
Right.
who still are struggling with their disability identity. So just everything and anything. And I always tell people, if you have a story you would like to share, then I would love for you to come on my podcast. And I think there's a lot of people out there who think they do not have a story that's worth sharing. I promise you, your story is worth sharing. It has validation and it has impact and it has power. And I want you to know that. And I want you to know you can share it on my podcast or on any podcast that I've been on that I know would treat your story with the care and respect that it deserves. So that's definitely one thing that I always want to say. And my podcast, it's all about my guest. I just talk to you and give you questions to answer. It's really about you guys. My guests make my podcast what it is. And I consider my podcast a success because of all the amazing people that I get to talk to. So I'd love for you to come on the Unsyted Radio. And if you want to follow me on social media, I'm on Twitter at Unsyted Radio. Again, UNSY as in Yankee, TED, Unsyted Radio. And then in terms of like more formal professional business kind of talk, I am on LinkedIn under my legal name, Chad Bouton or Bouton, Bouton. I don't care how you say that.
Well, we really appreciate what you're doing, and you're so right. Like anybody in the disability community, their stories and experiences need to be heard, need to be told and listened to. You know, anybody trying to better themselves and just be accepting and be supportive needs to, even if it is uncomfortable, they need to be able to hear the stories, take them in, and apply them in some way. Even if it's small, start small and do as much as you can do, to make the world a better place for not only us, but for you, but for future generations.
Yeah, that's where my mind always goes is our conversations are going to be cataloged for the future generations to come. So there's a big possibility that one day someone 10 plus years down the road could stumble across one of our episodes and we might not be here anymore, but it could still have impact on their lives. So that's the way that I try to think of it. And if you have a story you would like to share, please don't hesitate to reach out to me, chad.m as in Michael.bouton chadbouton@gmail.com. You can definitely send me a message and I'll get you on the podcast. No questions asked.
But thank you so much for your time, and we'll talk to you some more later.
Thank you,
But to say,
Chad.
yeah,
Good
we'll keep this going on mine next time.
Yes.
Yep.
Have
Okay.
a good evening.
Have a good night.
All right. Thank you guys. This was so much fun. Thank you for letting me come on today.
Yes.
Thanks for watching, everyone. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget to encourage, educate, and empower someone today. Bye.
Thank